Sweet, looks good. Okay. Make sure I can see the comments. Stream is up. Sweet. Okay, so I'm gonna get started. It's 5 o'clock. Yeah, I'm gonna be cutting out of focus a little bit. I put my camera on autofocus, and normally it's manual focus, but I don't have anybody to help me, so I have no way of focusing it by myself. So I'll just leave it. So that's why I go fuzzy, and then I'll be in focus and fuzzy and focus. I don't know what it's trying to focus on. In any case, I have something a little bit different today. I've been working on some documents that are going to be free. You know, this isn't something you have to pay for or anything. I've got one on basic dimensions. I've got one, it's like the third video I've made about elongated holes or slotted holes or slots, whatever you want to call them. And then some other topics. I'm kind of looking to make guides for some of these GD&T things. I know there's lots of textbooks out there that, offer a lot of good information, but I don't know, something a little bit smaller that's more detailed than something you would get in like a quick, guide, a pocket guide is what I mean. And pocket guides, I suppose, have their value, but I think I'm trying to make something that has more examples, and we'll see where that goes. I mean, you can only put so much on paper. So this one, and I know that the terminology is just all over the place. This has been driving me nuts. So I put non-circular features of size. You could apply GD, anything that's not a hole, basically. So Y14.5 seems to flip-flop a little bit on the terminology here. I don't know if it ever uses the term slot, but it does seem to interchange the term slotted hole and elongated hole. I'm not exactly sure why. I don't have any example of open-ended slots, but they really be the same thing in almost any situation. And then tabs, I might kind of X that out eventually. And then, slots, even it's pretty obvious that I'm flip-flopping on what I want to call these things. I'm really just not sure what the best term is. My name here, website, when I share this, it'll have my website, YouTube channel, and of course, I am available for, company trainings and consultation and stuff. So I want to make, this it's a helpful document that's free and helpful, but also, kind of an advertisement. So, and I think this QR code, I'll put a label on it, but that'll take you to my website, I think. I've got a general reference to Y14.5 here. I don't know how deep I'm going to go with referencing everything that I talk about here. We'll see. Okay. Purpose of the guide, explain examples of slotted holes. I want to, obviously I don't want to just show what's in Y14.5, right? That's kind of useless. I can make a pocket guide where I just snip Y14.5 figures and put them on paper, kind of like the forums, right? It's just a bunch of pictures of Y14.5, and it's like, dude, I know that. Like, I'm looking for something else. Like, I need some other information besides a screenshot from Y14.5 or one of the ISO standards. So all my examples will be different from that. They'll be distinct. Where possible, I got to figure out how much reasoning I'm going to give. But again, I'd like it to be more, I know it sounds weird, my opinion, because most people who are going to be looking at this already know what a textbook says or what Y14.5 says. They're looking for like more information. And that's what I hear a lot when I teach this at like the 4-year college level. It's like, why do I choose this over this? Why would I use straightness and not rule number 1? Why would I use circularity and not run out? So I want to try to, well, not in this particular document, but I want to try to get more into that. I give an explanation of the terms. I won't talk about that because I just did. And I give an explanation of what a slotted hole is, and complain more about how the terms aren't consistent. Okay, those of you that have made drawings, I remember when I was getting into CAD drafting, I was dimensioning a slot or whatever, and a mentor was like, "No, you did it wrong." I was like, "Well, how am I supposed to do it?" And these three figures, right, are in Y14.5. As far as I know, they haven't changed since the 80s. I know that it's just like this in 1994, and it's like, do it like this. I'm like, which one? Either any one you want, just do it like this, right? So one of those things you don't want to get too far away from how they specify it. And I really break this down. The big thing with the ASME technique is you're always using a full radius. So you specify each tangent radius as just R instead of giving it a dimension. So you'll know what the dimension for R is because it'll come from here, right? It'll be what I've called in this little figure up here, the height dimension. And the reason that's done, or from what I gather, right, this is just my best guess. I don't know the people who wrote started the standard in the 1940s, but I would guess that tooling is generally given as a diameter. So a slotted hole, at least before CNC machines, you would literally have an end mill. Or you'd maybe drill the hole with a drill bit and come in with an end mill and just churn the distance you need to make the slot. So it wouldn't make sense to give that number as a radius because you're always going to have to double it to find out what your end mill is. And that's like that on a lot of drawing stuff. You're always giving diameters, whereas some of in like science and physics and stuff, you're always using radii or radius for everything. So it's just a slight difference, and that's one of the reasons more practical to use the diameter because that's what the tooling is going to be. Later, I talk about making these basic. There is a little mixing and matching you can do. It does matter whether it's basic or not basic. Now, as far as the schemes here, we can do center to center distance and the height. We can do the overall distance, right? This kind of length distance and the height in a note. Or we can do the kind of tip to tip distance and the height. So in any case, we're always giving that height or that full diameter. We can list either the kind of caliper distance or the distance to the centers there. Now, I'd argue, I don't know. I guess you're here to listen to me, so I'd argue that the method of locating these doesn't really matter. So with this one with the note, I don't see why you couldn't just locate it from, this center instead of having to go to the middle of it. And I don't really see why you couldn't just dimension this, right, from the center, right, if you liked how it's dimensioned and size. And, in fact, ASME doesn't really even make it clear where you're supposed to dimension this from. There's no, center on it. Maybe, put it in the comments if there's reasoning behind it that I'm not really seeing. And then down here, that basically just spell out, what I was talking about there. Man, that camera is just auto-focusing like crazy. If I move this microphone just a little bit, move my computer down. Ooh, that is wild. Okay. Okay, guys, let me fix this. It's driving me nuts. Okay. It's not perfect, but it's close enough. That little box, there we go, that'll go away. Okay, check it out. So the first thing I have to chat about here is profile. So profile is the simplest specification, right? You slap basic dimensions on there. Since they're basic, really doesn't even matter what dimensioning schemes you use. So you can over dimension it, have too many, dimensions, and it's okay, right? It's not, as long as they don't conflict with each other value wise. We use an all around symbol. I'd make I don't know, an argument that you don't really need it. I mean, I would probably put it there just in case, but you know, it depends whether you see a tangent curve as an abrupt change. And I've got all that written down here somewhere. I would use the all around symbol, right? Because what somebody could think is you only want the profile to apply to this flat, and then you want like some general profile to some larger number to apply to everything else. So I'm not saying don't use the all around symbol. It's just not clear to me that it's necessary. Down here, this example, I do show if you wanted the profile to apply to just the flats, you would need to specify that directly. So in this case, it's showing, you know, just this flat. You just have to repeat it, either repeat the feature control frame and pick 2 different letters, or I've seen where you pick more letters down here and you kind of stack them. You could do G to H down here and whatever letter I put down here, F to J, right? This is not in Y14.5, but I've seen people do that, and it seems to work out just fine. I've mentioned here that if you're using fasteners, it's probably not the best dimensioning scheme because you don't have any opportunity for any kind of bonus tolerance, right? Where I would recommend it is if it's just for like airflow or something, if it's not mating to anything, and that's totally possible. It could just be to let air in or out of something. You just need to, you know, cutouts, and you don't want holes, and slotted holes is the next best thing. Okay, next up is the position at maximum material condition, and this is, in the olden days, you would see boundary written underneath. You don't have to do that anymore. It's not necessary. Now, this one is a little bit weird because notice there's only one position feature control frame. Basically, this means the same thing as if you just had 2 of these. So if I put 3 plus or minus 20 thousandths, position 20 thousandths MMC, and then repeated the feature control frame down here, it'd have the same meaning. This is just to save some space. So this whole boundary business, all that's going on here is you're just going to have a similar kind of pill shape, right? And I've drawn it down here. And you're just going to subtract the maximum material condition of the length and the height by the position, right? So the position applies to both sides. So for the length here, we're going to have a MMC of 2.98, and we're going to subtract the position tolerance, 20 thousandths, 2.9. So I know it's really tough to see, but the distance of our virtual condition here from end to end is 2.96. The height, 0.71. We take the MMC minus the position. And then those radii are just full radii, right? Those just kind of get shrunk down with the whole thing. So the idea with this is that you could, I'm not saying you have to, you could have some kind of gauge where this virtual condition or boundary is represented. You drop the part on there, it either fits or it doesn't. And then all you have to do is make sure that slot isn't too big with nice and easy, 2-point measurements. Depending on, where this drawing goes, some people are just going to be more comfortable with plus or minus dimensions, right? If you have to explain it to somebody, it's much, much easier to do, and you can still have that design intent, right? The height of this virtual condition represents the virtual condition of your fastener, right? So you'd set your virtual condition of your fastener to that, and you should have an assembly that goes together pretty well. And I mentioned all that down here. While I'm here, I mentioned the gauge thing. This would be basically, I won't say impossible. There's no support in Y14.5 for having this at regardless of feature size. Because what that would kind of entail is that you have an unrelated actual mating envelope that's a slot shape that expands outward while it's perfectly located to A, B, and C. So this whole pill shape expands outward until it kind of captures the feature, and then you find out what the axis and center plane of that is. Oh, and I misspoke a little bit. It wouldn't be located to the datum reference frame. It'd be the unrelated actual mating envelope, so it kind of best fit to the actual feature, and then you'd measure it. It's really impossible to do in a physical way. A computer can crush it, but possible to do in a physical way. Okay, so this one really freaks people out. It's really not so bad. The key thing with this is you're really just replacing, right? So now we got a basic dimension 3. Basic dimension is 3, and we've got a profile of 0.06. Is really equivalent to this, right? It's just basically taking a plus or minus dimension and converting it into profile, right? It just makes things a little bit cleaner, especially with Y145-2018, where they really want you to use profile and basic dimensions for everything. This works pretty well, but essentially that's the only difference. Your boundary here is going to be not quite the same, because why is this different? Oh, it's only, I got it. Let me actually make a note of that. So the boundary is going to be the same as the previous example if the dimension was the same. So if I made this profile 40 thousandths, then it would be, and that caused me for some reason I thought I had those tolerances being the exact same, but they're not. But essentially, yeah, you can gauge it the same way, and the idea is after that you just make sure the slot obeys that profile tolerance, right? So not as easy to explain to somebody how to do this with hand tools, but it's possible. You could break this down, be like, hey, you got this tolerance zone all the way around, and it's split on the true profile, and kind of figure it back out to here. But the question is, why not just put this on the drawing if it's much more more clear? Okay, the next one here, we've got position at MMC, but we've got different tolerances for the length and the height. And I keep mentioning that. It's right here. I'm calling the height the vertical dimension, and the width is that horizontal dimension. So all we're changing here, our boundary is going to be the same, given we're using maximum material condition here. We're just changing, the length or the height of our boundary. And normally we'd want this dimension to be tight, because we should already kind of know what the virtual condition of our mating feature is. So we set that. But then the other dimension can vary a lot more, right? Because it's not going to bind very easily, to an extent, of course. So we give large tolerance here, and effectively what that's just going to do is shrink this dimension, right? So if you think about it, your gauge is physically going to be smaller, which allows a greater variety of length of slots, right? Because this dimension stays the same. Well, you could make this dimension bigger or smaller. Oh yeah, that's a good question, Matthews. So the question is, hi, are there any other feature shapes I can apply maximum material position to, or is it reserved only for circular and oblong shapes? So the answer is, yeah, you could if you had like a wacky triangle shape, you can use this where you're using profile, and you really need profile because you're going to need basic dimensions to define all this wacky stuff. But then, yeah, you would use a position. The position has to be at MMC, and the position will be to whatever datum reference frame you have. But yeah, the same rules apply. You'll just subtract whatever this basic dimension is from here, and that'll give you a boundary. So the boundary is equal to the profile minus the position. Well, I'm sorry, the basic dimension minus the profile minus the position. But you can kind of see what's going on here. So yeah, it could really be any shape as long as it's internal. We can't use this for external features. So hopefully that answered your question there. Okay, composite profile. This would probably be best if there's like a pattern of features and they're being, say, like punched, right? So you have like a punch press or something, and you know the pattern of slotted holes doesn't matter as much to the sides of the part. Functionally, right? I mean, this is what you want to set your virtual condition or your mating feature. So what I mean there is when we look at what size fastener would fit in here, it would be this 0.75 minus this 20 for a 0.73, right? Because this dimension up here, or not dimension, this part of the feature control frame affects the location and the orientation, where the bottom one is going to affect like the size and the form in this case. So just keep an eye on that. Yeah, you're welcome, Matthews. It was a good question. Thank you. And I'll probably add that to this presentation as well before it goes out to the public or whatever. Okay, next up, I go into some more situations. So in this one, I've got a position at regardless of feature size, right? And there's a reason I'm not using position for the other part of the tolerance. So the position just applies to the height and not the width. It doesn't make sense, in my opinion, to apply a position at regardless of feature size to the width, because it's not clear to me what the unrelated actual mating envelope would be for that. So just real quick, right? Say we put a position on here of whatever number to our datum reference frame, and it applies to this. I don't know what you're getting from like this width feature, right? I mean, I've heard all sorts of stuff. I've heard, oh, you get an axis, you get a point, you get a center plane. It's just not clear to me. And you can look in Y14.5. They give a description of an extruded feature like a pill shape as a datum, but that's different from what we're talking about here. So I just don't recommend it. So what I did here, right, and this is examples not in Y14.5, we're using position regardless of feature size, which you can simulate, right? You could get a block or a stack of blocks or something in here to find the center plane and measure it relative to our datum reference frame. That is doable, okay? And then we're going to control this left to right business with plus or minus dimensions, right? Not ideal, but it's also not the critical function of the slot, right? So that's something we could probably live with if this was something we wanted to do here. For whatever reason, you wanted to use position at regardless of feature size. Again, Y14.5 2018 doesn't recommend doing this, but if you need to, you need to. Notice how the R is not basic, so it's a plus or minus dimension. It doesn't really mean it's going to get like checked unless there's something really wrong with it. And I think I'll discuss that in a later slide. So next up, we've got position at regardless of feature size. The difference, and this is subtle, is that now our R, or full radius, is basic. And like most drawings on the planet, right, there's going to be this, unless otherwise specified, profile. So what I've done here is change the dimensions for the location of the slot. Well, this 1 inch was basic before, to basic, but we've kept this position tolerance, right? This could be regardless of feature size or MMC, it doesn't matter. But what's going on here is that now the profile tolerance is going to take over control of those radii, right? So when we check it, right, there's no plus or minus or anything going on. We have to check it to this number, right? So that's probably a better way of doing it than plus or minus dimensions. But the question is, like, do you really want to spend time checking those? I mean, maybe, I don't know. But keep in mind that'll be to this datum reference frame of A, B, and C. And what I mean by that is it's tougher to measure, and that this one, when you have the plus or minus dimension on there, you're essentially kind of measuring from where the slot actually is. Over here, because this profile is kind of locked into place, the slot feature could be kind of out of position, and you could end up with a kind of a step, right? Because they're not exactly in sync with each other, because one is the center plane and the other is the actual surface. I mentioned right here plus minus dimensions, right? It's not the end of the world to use these. There are some parts, sheet metal, something that's going to be cut on like a water jet or a laser, where it might not make sense to put GD&T all over the thing, right? In which case you just want to follow, the ASME dimensioning scheme. Use this full radius, and just use plus or minus dimensions if that's acceptable. Okay, cool. We're almost to the end. So, this is the second to last slide. So I wanted to give some more use cases of using a slotted feature as a datum. In this case, we're specifying just the center plane of this as a datum feature, specifically a center plane. This is really the way you want to typically do it, and I'll show in the next slide here why we want to do that. But typically it's going to control a rotational degree of freedom, because you're going to have like a pivot point over here somewhere that's going to control translational degrees of freedom. Now this part is so simple that we're just showing how you would call it out. What I don't agree with is this second one. Again, this is shown in in the datum section of Y14.5, having this slot shape feature. I think they call it an extruded feature or something. Using that as a datum. I really don't recommend that because you really need a computer to solve for it. It's also going to take away, depending on how you use it, up to 5 degrees of freedom. So it's not just taking away rotation, it's going to take away this as well. So it's going to take away translational degrees of freedom as well as rotational degrees of freedom. I wouldn't recommend it unless it's the primary datum, but even then it's still not good. Okay, then the last slide here, and there'll be more to come, I think, before I release this. But this is a typical use case for a slot. So we've got this little, maybe it's a PCB or something, a little printed circuit board. We've got datum A as the flat, Datum B is this hole. And instead of using another hole for datum B, all we really need is this slotted feature, because all we're doing is stopping translation or rotation. So datum A takes away 3 degrees of freedom. Datum B takes away 2 translational degrees of freedom. And then this slotted feature takes away 1 rotational degree of freedom. So it's not over constraining it. If it's a hole, right, it could take away, it's kind of fighting this other one here, because it can take away a degree of translation, whereas this one cannot, based on its geometry. So yeah, this is a legit system. You could technically do it with a hole. It looks a little weird, but say this was literally a hole, you could specify a bidirectional position, go in the other way, and give it, I don't know, a bunch of tolerance. Right, so the hole could move to the left or the right more, but you've got to keep, you basically have more tolerance left or right than up or down. But before I leave that there, your perpendicularity would be equal. Actually, no, this probably would need an extra perpendicularity, because the axis could lean, right, that whole 80 thousandths. So you probably want some kind of extra perpendicularity control. That would need a diameter symbol. So it kind of gets out of hand pretty quickly, and that's why the slotted hole can be a definite help there. Okay. All right, that's it. So, I don't know, maybe a week or something, I'll have this out. I'm working on an hour or two every day, actually. Well, maybe not 2. Maybe about an hour every day. This, and I've got one on basic dimensions I'll talk about next week. And then we'll go from there, see if, I guess I'll never know how popular this thing is. Or maybe I'll get a bunch of emails, then I'll know. But yeah, I'll get this shared pretty soon. If you're signed up to my website, I think I have a newsletter. I haven't really shared anything, but I'll send this out, share on LinkedIn. I don't know if I can share files on YouTube, but I'll see. So yeah, if you enjoyed, please like this video, leave a comment. Let me know if you'd like me to talk about something else besides these documents, and I'll see you guys next week. All right, yeah, you're welcome.